I want to tell you about a business owner I worked with, a partner in a 4-person firm. So by every measure, he was good at his job. So clients respected him, his partners valued him, and when it came to the actual work, he delivered genuinely excellent results. There was just one problem. He was always late. Every deliverable, every client presentation, every internal deadline. His partners learned early that giving the client a firm end date was a mistake because he would miss it. It wasn't malicious or careless. He simply worked on his own timeline according to his own priorities, and no amount of pressure changed that. So his partners stopped applying pressure, right? They stopped giving clients firm deadlines. They built buffer into every project and called it planning. And the business, well, it's still running. Clients are still happy enough, and work is still excellent. So when I debriefed his Hogan assessment, and this is the one I use in my coaching practice with my larger client engagements, I love the Hogan. His result came back at 100% on what Hogan calls the leisurely scale. That's the passive aggressive behavior metric. And when I shared that result with him, he looked at it and he said, "Yes, that's me." Just recognition. So here's what I want you to notice about that story. His behavior was passive aggressive by clinical definition, and yet it was tolerable. His partners found a way to absorb it. He was a good natured guy. The business survived it. He remained in many ways a valuable colleague. But I have sat across from enough executives to know that this is the best case version of this story, because when passive aggressive behavior becomes disordered, when it stops being a quirk and starts being a weapon, it looks completely different. It looks like being left off emails you needed to be on. It looks like a promotion conversation that goes nowhere for 2 years. It looks like a colleague who agrees with everything in the meeting and undermines everything after it. It looks like a boss who is always charming, always reasonable, always busy, and somehow your career never moves. That's what we're talking about today. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what you're dealing with, why it's so hard to name, and what to do about it. I'm Christina Holloway. For over 25 years, I've coached senior leaders at organizations like Google, GE, and Spotify to architect their authority and navigate the high-stakes politics of the Fortune 500. On this channel, I show you how to recognize the power plays hiding in plain sight and how to communicate with the presence that demands a seat at the table. All right, so let's get started. Let's start with what passive-aggressive behavior actually is, because most people misuse the term. When we call someone passive-aggressive in everyday conversation, we usually mean they're being indirect or a little snippy. Maybe they gave us backhanded compliment. Maybe they responded to a text with "fine." So that's frustrating, but that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about is a behavioral pattern that Hogan identifies on what they call the leisurely scale. And the name is deliberate. Leisurely, as in moving at their own pace, on their own timeline, according to their own priorities. Here's how Hogan describes it. This person seems charming, affable, cooperative, and supportive. They appear to be a team player. They say the right things in the meeting. They agree with the plan. They smile when you present your idea. And then they go do exactly what they were going to do anyway. That gap between what they present and what they actually do is the defining feature of this pattern, and it's what makes it so disorienting for the people around them. Because here's what happens. You walk out of the meeting feeling like you're aligned. You have an agreement, you have a deadline, you have a plan. And then the deadline passes and there's an explanation, a reasonable one, a last minute conflict, an unexpected priority, something that came up. So you reset, you realign, you give them another deadline, and it happens again. And at some point, maybe after the third or fourth cycle, you start wondering if the problem is you. Were your expectations too high? Were you not clear enough? Did you not give them enough runway? Is it your fault because you pushed too hard? First, no, it is not. That self-doubt is the trap, and it's exactly where passive-aggressive behavior wants you. Now, here's what the Hogan framework adds that most conversations about this pattern miss entirely. This behavior exists on a spectrum. On one end, you have the partner I described in the opening, someone who moves at their own pace, misses deadlines, but delivers excellent work and causes manageable disruption. Frustrating, but workable. On the other end, you have something that looks entirely different. It's disordered behavior. Someone who's actively, if quietly, working against you, who procrastinates as a form of protest, who withholds support as a form of punishment, who uses the appearance of cooperation as cover for deliberate sabotage. Same pattern, completely different stakes. And the reason it's so important to understand the spectrum is this: the early signs look identical. The person who's simply avoidant and the person who's actively undermining you present almost exactly the same way in the beginning. Missed deadlines, vague commitments, reasonable explanations. The difference only becomes clear over time. And by the time most people recognize what they're dealing with, they've already lost significant ground. Passive aggressive behavior is avoidant at its core. These are people who find direct confrontation deeply uncomfortable, sometimes because of fear, sometimes insecurity, sometimes simply because they've never developed the capacity for it. Procrastination is one of its most common expressions. So is selective follow through. So is the meeting that gets rescheduled just often enough to never actually happen. They are the people who will never tell you directly that they disagree with you. They will tell you yes and then find 17 ways to make sure the answer is no. That's the pattern. And once you see it clearly, you cannot unsee it. Now that you understand the pattern, I want to give you something more specific because passive aggressive behavior doesn't look the same in every person or even every situation. In my years of debriefing the Hogan Assessment, I've seen it show up in 3 distinct ways, and each one requires a slightly different response. And I call these the 3 faces of the passive aggressive trap. The first face is the resistor. The resistor is the most classic expression of this pattern. They appear cooperative on the surface, agreeable in meetings, pleasant in conversation, supportive in principle. But underneath that pleasantness is a quiet, stubborn resistance to anything that disrupts their agenda or their timeline. Hogan describes this person as someone who seems cooperative and interested in feedback, but is stubborn and unwilling to change. Someone who works according to their own timetable and puts their own priorities in front of the requests of others. In the workplace, the resistor looks like this. They agree to a deadline and miss it. They commit to a deliverable and deliver something different. They support a decision in the room and quietly undermine it outside the room. They are never openly defiant. There is always an explanation, and the explanation is always reasonable enough that you can't quite call it out directly. The most insidious version of the resistor is the one with organizational power, because when a resistor sits above you in the hierarchy, their resistance becomes your obstacle. The promotion that never materializes, the project that never gets approved, the feedback that never translates into action. You keep doing everything right and somehow nothing moves. I had a client, a senior leader at a large organization, who spent 18 months trying to get her boss to formally recommend her for a vice president role, and every conversation went well. Her boss was encouraging. He acknowledged her contributions. He agreed she was ready, and then nothing. A last-minute conflict on the day of the succession planning meeting, a restructuring that pushed the timeline back, a new initiative that required her focus first. 18 months. Zero movement. That's the resistor in a position of power. And the reason it's so damaging is that it looks from the outside like organizational complexity. It takes a very clear eye to see it for what it actually is. And don't beat yourself up if you couldn't see it. What I'm sharing today is very hard. The second face is the scorekeeper. The scorekeeper operates from a place of perceived inequity. They believe, genuinely believe, that their contributions are undervalued, their workload is unfair, and that the organization owes them something it has failed to deliver. And rather than addressing that belief directly, they settle the score. quietly. Hogan calls this the unappreciated dimension, the feeling that one's talents and contributions are ignored, the perception of inequity in assigned workloads. In the workplace, the scorekeeper looks like this. They downplay your contributions in meetings using a consistent rationale. Your idea gets acknowledged briefly and moved past. Their idea gets expanded and developed. You present a solution and it gets minimal traction. They present a variation of the same solution 2 weeks later and it lands. They are also the colleague who goes quiet when you need their input, who doesn't show up fully on your project because they've decided privately that you don't deserve their full effort, who misses your deadlines because in their internal accounting, your priorities rank below theirs. The scorekeeper is particularly difficult to navigate because their behavior feels personal, and it is, in a way, but the score they're settling often has nothing to do with you specifically. You just happened to be standing in the way of something they felt they deserved. This too is hard, to remove yourself from the personal injury. I worked with a client who co-led a major initiative with a peer who consistently minimized her contributions and leadership updates. Every time she presented progress, her co-lead found a way to reframe it as a team effort, which sounded generous until you realize he was doing it selectively. His contributions were always specific and named. Hers were always folded into the collective. Over time, leadership began to associate the initiative's success with him. She brought the data, the analysis, and most of the execution. He brought the narrative, and the narrative won. That's the scorekeeper. They're not fighting you openly. They are simply making sure the record reflects their version of events. The third face is the slow burn. The slow burn is the most quietly destructive of the three. They are privately irritated by interruptions, by requests, by suggestions, by the simple fact of being asked to do things differently than they prefer, but they show almost none of it on the surface. Hogan describes this as someone who's privately but easily irritated by interruptions, requests, or work-related suggestions, someone who hides their feelings when annoyed, someone whose quiet stubbornness impacts the ability to build and sustain a team. In the workplace, the slow burn looks like this. They respond to your emails eventually. They attend your meetings sometimes. They fulfill their commitments partially. There's never a dramatic failure. There's just a consistent low-grade withdrawal of full engagement, and because each individual instance is deniable, the pattern is almost impossible to confront directly. The slow burn is also the person who, when they finally do reacts in a way that seems disproportionate to the moment because it's been accumulating privately for months. Every ask that irritated them, every interruption they absorbed without comment, every suggestion they disagreed with and said nothing about, by the time it surfaces, it comes out sideways, like in a meeting, in a performance review, in a conversation with someone else entirely. My clients describe the slow burn like this. Everything seems fine, and then one day you find out from someone else that your colleague's been unhappy with you for 6 months, that your boss has concerns about your performance that were never raised directly with you, that a peer has been telling people you're difficult to work with while being perfectly pleasant to your face. That's the slow burn. The damage happens in the spaces you can't see. And by the time it becomes visible, it's already shaped how others perceive you. Here's what all three faces have in common. They are indirect, they are deniable, and they are designed, consciously or unconsciously, to avoid the direct conversation that would actually resolve the problem. That avoidance is the signature. Whatever face it wears, that's what you're looking for. So why do smart, capable, experienced professionals keep falling victim to this pattern? Smart people who are good at reading rooms, smart people who are skilled at navigating complexity, smart people who in almost every other professional situation trust their instincts. Here's why. Passive-aggressive behavior is specifically designed, again, consciously or unconsciously, to be deniable. Every single behavior I just described has a reasonable explanation attached to it. The missed deadline had a cause. The rescheduled meeting had a conflict. The minimized contribution was framed as team building. The withheld support was presented as a difference of opinion. And because each individual incident is explainable, you don't respond to the pattern. You respond to the incident. You address the missed deadline. You reschedule the meeting. You clarify your contribution. You have the conversation about alignment. And then it happens again. So you do what capable people do. You adapt. You over-communicate to reduce the ambiguity. You soften your asks to reduce the friction. You add more context, more lead time, more patience. You make it as easy as possible for this person to follow through. And it still happens again. Here's the insight that changes everything. You are not failing to communicate clearly enough. You are not being too demanding. You are not misreading the situation. What you are doing is applying a good faith solution to a bad faith pattern. And good faith solutions do not work on bad faith patterns. Remember this. The trap is not the behavior itself. The trap is your response to it. Specifically, the moment you start adjusting yourself to accommodate behavior that was the other person's responsibility to own, write that down and put it on your desk. You cannot nice your way out of a passive-aggressive dynamic. You cannot over-explain your way out of it. You cannot be patient enough, clear enough, or accommodating enough to resolve it, because the behavior is the point. The avoidance is the point. And every adjustment you make simply confirms that the strategy is working. The good news is this. Once you see the pattern clearly, once you stop responding to individual incidents and start responding to the dynamic itself, everything changes. So that's what the direct response playbook is designed to do. The direct response playbook is built on one principle. You are responding to behavior, not diagnosing personality. You're not trying to change who this person is. You are not trying to get them to see themselves clearly. You are creating the conditions in which their behavior becomes harder to sustain and easier to document. 5 moves. Let's go. Move number 1, name the pattern to yourself first. Before you do anything else, you have to see it clearly. Stop explaining it away. Stop giving the benefit of the doubt to a pattern that has repeated itself enough times to be a pattern. What you're experiencing is real. The clinical framework exists because this behavior is real. Recognition is not accusation. It is information, and you cannot respond strategically to something you are still trying to rationalize. Move number 2, create paper trails, not pressure. Stop relying on verbal agreements. Everything gets confirmed in writing, not as a gotcha, as a clarity tool. After every conversation that involves commitment, a deadline, or an expectation, you just follow up in writing, just confirming we agreed on X to be delivered by Y. Simple. Professional, undeniable. Passive-aggressive behavior depends on ambiguity. A paper trail removes the ambiguity. Move number 3, make the implicit explicit. Vague agreements are oxygen for this pattern. Your job is to remove the vagueness. Deadlines become specific dates. Commitments become documented expectations. Roles become clearly defined before the work begins. When everything is explicit, the deniability disappears. And when the deniability disappears, the pattern becomes visible to you and to anyone else who needs to see it. Move number 4, stop over-explaining your asks. Every time you over-justify a request, you hand them material to negotiate with. A clear, direct ask with a specific timeline is significantly harder to deflect than a lengthy explanation of why you need something. Brevity is not rudeness, it is clarity, and clarity is the one thing this pattern cannot easily absorb. Move number 5, escalate the pattern, not the incident. When the time comes to involve leadership, you bring a pattern, not a complaint. You bring dates, documented agreements, written follow-ups, and a clear timeline of repeated behavior. You are not saying this person is difficult. You are showing with evidence that a pattern exists that is affecting outcomes. This pattern speaks for itself. Your job is simply to make sure it is visible. One last thing, passive-aggressive behavior could look like my client's partner good-natured and neutral, or it could affect your career, like my client whose boss constantly threw roadblocks in her way. If you want to know how to deal with a boss like this, I have a video on that right here. Passive-aggressive behavior is one of the most disorienting patterns you will encounter in a professional environment. Is it the most dramatic or the most obvious? No, but it is specifically designed to make you question your own perception. It hides behind pleasantness. It operates through deniability, and it does its most significant damage in the spaces between what was said and what was actually done. Understanding it clearly, naming the three faces, recognizing the trap, knowing how to respond with a direct response playbook is not just practical self-protection, it is the foundation of professional agency. Because you cannot architect your authority in an environment you cannot see clearly. And we are just getting started. Next week, we're going to go deeper. We're going to talk about the risk-averse boss, the leader who says yes in the meeting and finds 17 reasons to say no everywhere else. If you've ever had a great idea die a slow, quiet death inside an organization that claimed to value innovation, that video is for you. If today's video resonated with you, if you recognize the pattern we named, if you are navigating a passive-aggressive dynamic right now, I want to hear about it in the comments below. Tell me which of the three faces you're dealing with, because naming what is happening is always the first step toward responding to it with intention rather than reaction. My free communication toolkit is linked in the description below. It includes the boundary statements and frameworks we've referenced throughout this series. I'm Christina Holloway. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.